What did we accomplish in the first session? We heard that this melodious expression of the fountain of spiritual unfoldment came about to Adi Shankaracharya when he saw an old Pandit, the Sanskrit scholar, on the banks of the river Ganges, repeating aphorism of grammarian Panini day in and day out, instead of taking steps to seek enlightenment before the death arrived at his doorsteps. Gifted with keen observation of human behavior, during his times, he had noted that the human beings were deeply rooted in the material wealth and sensual pleasures rather than being prayerful and spiritual. Instead of becoming one's own true friend by uplifting oneself with this precious gift of human life, Shankaracharya had observed that the average human being was wasting his gift of human life by turning into his worst enemy. Like we say in the fifth verse of the sixth chapter, Uddharet Atmanatmanam, Natmanam Savasadayet, Atmaiva Yatmo Bandhu, Atmaiva Ripuratmanam. Shankaracharya was also interested in clarifying the confusion of Bhakti Marga, that is liberation through devotion, and Jnana Marga, liberation through the pursuit of knowledge. He had noted that the human beings were deluded in their material pursuits and instead stressed the need for regular prayers to gain the knowledge so as to get liberation, moksha, in this very life, and de-emphasized the value of rituals with animal sacrifices, Vedangas, and other secular sciences which were primarily pursued to gain greater material prosperity. We also learned last time meanings of the word Gau and Govinda and stories that went along with it. We also heard another interesting stories such as stories out of sage Narada, who mastered several sciences including Vedangas but missed the most important knowledge of Brahman, Bhuya, for which he had to seek help of sage Sanat Kumar. We also heard the story of enlightened devotee Hanuman, who was only interested in finding his Rama, the true expression or incarnation of Lord Vishnu, and nothing else, not even the exquisite pearls gifted by goddess Sita to him. And finally, we learned that we must always keep Govinda in our mind to keep right frame of mind, just as during pradakshina is right, circumambulation, we keep our desired goals to our right side. We concluded the first session by learning that incessant thirst or greed for material wealth never leads to happiness, and instead that it indeed becomes a significant obstacle for one's spiritual growth. Instead, one should learn to remain happy and content through whatever the livelihood earned through one's own hard work. Finally, Professor Prasanna Kumar during the comment session summarized the several ways through which we can perform our prayers to the Lord of our hearts. Last time we studied about a couple of verses. Today we hope to cover at least 4 to 5 verses this morning. I'm not good at singing, but I'll say in Sanskrit. The lead of the third verse is, do not pray, do not fall prey to infatuation. Third verse. Nari stanabhara nabhi desham, drishtamaga mohavesham, etanmao samvisadi vikaram, manasi vichintaya varam varam. Do not fall prey to infatuation upon seeing a woman's full bosom and navel region. This is nothing but a modification of flesh, fat, etc. Deliberate instead on repeatedly that particular fact in your mind. To take one by word, Nari Stanabhara, that means attractive bosom of maidens. Nabhi Desham is regional navel. Drishtva, having seen. Maga, do not go. Mohavesham is avesham, infatuated state of mind or maddening delusion. Etat, this. Mausa is flesh. Vasa is fat. Vikaram, modification. Manasi vichintaya varam varam. Repeatedly remember that in your mind. In this verse, the last verse that we said last time, was so to give up unending craving or greed for wealth, which indeed becomes a major obstruction in doing the worship of Govinda. In this stanza, Shankaracharya advises us to give up lusty passions for the opposite sex. In these two consecutive verses, second and third, he has warned us against getting entangled and enamored with Kanchana and Kamini, infatuation with gold, wealth, and beautiful damsel. Biologically, there is natural affinity for the charms of the opposite sex. However, this natural urge must be controlled and disciplined and must base it upon righteous and established norms of the society, like a formal wedding. The woman is mentioned here since Shankaracharya was addressing his disciples who were all men. This comment applies equally to women as well, because infatuation can also rise in their minds when they see an attractive man. A natural attraction for the opposite sex prevails in all living beings, and human being is no exception. However, when this attraction becomes infatuation, it takes over the mind and does not allow it to dwell on Govinda. It's difficult to maintain purity under natural conditions. Then why should one's eyes ever feast on a woman that he is not married to? Looking at the sensuous beauties never leads to satisfaction, but instead breeds illicit desires which can ultimately lead to destruction. Instead, every human being must make proper decisions based strictly upon ethical values, what we know as dharma. Shankaracharya does not suggest that he should suppress your feelings. Such suppression will only result in distortion of the mind. Preoccupation with sense gratification, emphasizes, results in tremendous waste of energy that should be conserved and redirected towards one's own personal improvement. Remember, animals merely follow their instincts. It said, Ahara nidra bhayamaithunam cha samanya etat pashubhir narana. The following things are common for both animals and human beings. Ahar, need to appease hunger. Nidra, need to sleep. Bhaya, that means fear, and has the need to protect oneself. Maithunam, the need for sense gratification. These natural instincts that are present in animals as well as human beings. Unfortunately, these are instincts that are glorified in our present day life when we watch the movies and the TVs. We as human beings must remember that we have something special that sets us apart from the animals. The righteous, or living with proper attitude and judgment, will follow something else. It is said, Dharmo hi tesham vishesha, dharmena hinaha pashuvi samana. That means we have been blessed with intellect. We follow the dharma. That is something special for human being. And once you give up the dharma, dharmena hinaha, you become nothing but an animal. If you look around, we see most of humanity exhausting itself in the pursuit of artha, that is security, kama, and sense gratification. When these become predominant, or perhaps the only impulses in life, dharma, or the value of the virtue, is bound to suffer or disappear altogether. Animals act strictly on their instincts and result in impulses. Human beings with God-given free will have a rational intellect. They have the capacity to curb and control the flow of all instincts of carnal pleasures and redirect those energies in the service of others and towards the causes that are much more noble and divine, such as to gain that important and vital knowledge of Brahman by regularly praying a deity of a choice in this particular booklet, Lord Govinda. Let's rehash once again the stories. Good to remember them. That story of King Shivaji and Gautam Buddha. After his victory, King Shivaji was presented with the most beautiful damsel from the conquered region, who happened to be the wife of Subedar from Surat. He welcomed her as his own sister, gave her new clothes and ornaments, and returned her back to her husband who had lost that battle. Similarly, when Amrapali walked in during the Buddha's discourse with the seductive attire and body language, the enlightened Gautam Buddha addressed her in a very respectful voice and treated her just as he would his own mother. That enlightened response resulted in the total transformation of Amrapali, who changed her way of life of being a royal courtesan, becoming Buddha's disciple and serving the humanity to the rest of her life. The title of the next verse is Life is Unsteady and Unpredictable. It goes in Sanskrit like this: Nalini dalagata jalamati taralam tadvat jivita matishaya chapalam viddhi vyada abhimana grastam lokam shokahatam cha samastam. To translate in English, he said, the water drop on a lotus petal has an extremely uncertain existence. So also is our human life very unstable. Please understand, the very world is consumed by disease and pride and is riddled with pain and suffering. It's good to listen to the Sanskrit words and understand the meaning. Nalini dalagata jalam, water drop, jalam, on the lotus petal, Nalini dala. Atitaralam, very unstable. Tadvat, so also, Viddhi, may we understand, may you understand, Jivitam Atishayam Chapalam, life is very, very unstable. Vyadhi Abhimana Grastam, consumed by disease and pride. Vyadhi is disease, Abhiman is pride. Lokam Shokahatam Chasamastam, the world is riddled with grief or pain and suffering. Beautiful Sanskrit. After warning us about two treacherous rocks, namely insatiable greed for money and immoral sensual urges, which can result in a shipwreck as we ride this ocean of human life, samsara sara, Adi Shankara is reminding us in this verse as to how ephemeral our human existence is in the first place. Our life is indeed transient and riddled with painful imperfections. In the first half, he painted mortality of the individual existence. The second half of the stanza, he observes the pain-ridden nature of the world itself. It is a gentle, as yet a stern reminder that we do not have a moment to waste, do not have a single moment to waste, since we do not know exactly when our mortal existence would come to an abrupt end. The statement is realistic and not pessimistic. Important, it's not pessimistic, realistic, just reminding. Like in the examination hall, you get a 5-minute warning, exam time is going to be over, so you better hurry up. The story in Mahabharata, Yaksha Prashna, is very appropriate to share with us, all of us together today. Pandavas, as they were completing 12 years of Vanvas, came across a Brahmin who was complaining to them that a deer has taken away the couple of aranis, a pair of wooden sticks that he uses to start the fire by rubbing them, so that he can do the yajna and do his puja that he always done. The Pandavas said, we'll help you. And as they were searching for that deer which had taken away those wooden sticks, Yudhishthira got very thirsty and requested his youngest brother Nakula to fetch some water for him. He goes to the nearby lake where a yaksha is standing, and he's warning him, don't drink that water, it will be poisonous unless you answer my questions. He didn't listen. He drank that water first before taking it. He died. Other 4 brothers also walked, and one by one they died for the same reason. Finally, Yudhishthira himself walked down, saw his dead brothers on the shore, and Yaksha walking up to him, answer my questions, otherwise you'll meet the same fate. The Yudhishthira did not back off, but went on to answer all his questions accurately. And finally, all his brothers came alive. During that discussion, which I won't bore with you because in the entire chapter of one section of Mahabharata, one of the most important questions was, what is the greatest wonder in the world? And Yudhishthira answered, day after day, countless people die. Yet the living beings wish to live forever. O Lord, what can be the greatest wonder? As a matter of fact, I can tell you my personal experience. I observed several physicians around me in the hospitals, brilliant physicians who took care of the patients, cardiothoracic surgeons, took care of patients with heart attacks, coronary bypasses, and cancer of the lung. But they were chimney smokers, chain smokers. Even though we gently suggested them, they continued smoking. And that was depressing to watch. Knowing that it is inappropriate, they were still doing it. Now, again, coming back to the verse, the simile of the lotus leaf explains the complex subject in a very simple, practical means, because the nature of human existence is beautifully depicted here. You see, lotus grows in water, exists in water, nurtured by the water. That's exactly where it perishes. Because the lotus is nothing but an expression of water. It springs forth to that exquisite manifestation of the water in the form of water lily, because the seed at the bottom that is underneath is something special. Similarly, Brahman, the infinite, projects itself as the lotus in the form of a human body due to Sankalpa or Parabdha. This Brahman existing in infinite consciousness is divine and all-pervading. This very Brahman functioning in and through its equipment is the individuality known as Jiva, is called Atman. Due to the ignorance of its own nature, the Jiva is unsteady and over-agitated. Only when Jiva gains the knowledge of his true nature, the teachings of the Guru, the enlightened teacher, who comes in our lives strictly as the result of God's grace, he no longer remains ignorant, returns back to merge once again with the waters of consciousness around. Just the same way the dreamer awakens in the knowledge that it was simply a dream. Joys of the mortal life are as fleeting and as unstable as the water drop on the lotus leaf. Man's mind rolls from one desire to another, just as the water drop dances on the lotus leaf. Afflicted by the ailment of unending desire and tossed and turned by the uncontrolled attachments, human life gets increasingly entangled in grief. The water drop on the lotus leaf trembles, so too is the human life, precarious and unstable. As long as Jiva remains ignorant of his true identity, he remains in the tight grip of disease and anxiety and remains smitten by sorrow and rots in the never-ending cycles of birth and death, birth and death. The only solution to this painful dilemma is the regular prayers such as Bhaja Govindam till true identity is realized through guidance. Our human life is as unsteady and unpredictable as a droplet of the water resting on the lotus petal. This water does not touch petal itself really, and it's so unsteady that even the slightest breeze causes it to slide off. And Shankaracharya reminds us, we do not have any luxury of wasting any time, since our human life is very, very unstable. Atisham, Achala. No one knows how long one would live, since one could develop a stroke or have a heart attack, or may be a late stage cancer detected tomorrow. I have a tendency of gifting a book on Bhagavad Gita of my choice to the college graduates. A typical reaction that I've observed over years, they accept it with graciousness and promise me that they will read it. But what they are doing actually is they plan to read it when they get old and they retire. At the same time, when the same young man finds a job and gets married, he goes right ahead to buy life insurance and policy, saying, who knows what will happen to me next? I'm providing for my wife. This young man understands that death could come anytime, And as yet, when it comes to reading Bhagavad Gita, which indeed illustrates the knowledge of Brahman and details the methodology to accomplish it, that certainly becomes practical for this young man who expects to live for a very long time to retire. The next verse title should be, Do Not Depend Upon Others for Security. The verse goes like this. Yavat vitto parjana shakta, yavat vitto parjana shakta, tavan nija parivaro rakta, paschat jivati jarjara dehe, varta kopina pruchati dehe. As long as there is ability to earn and save money, so long are all your dependents attached to you. Later on, when you come to live with an old, infirm body, no one at home cares to speak even a word to you. To make it short, I'll not discuss too much in Sanskrit on this. I'll go directly to the meaning. Typically, an unenlightened human being is totally selfish. Frequently, the human actions are based upon a common question: what is in there for me? Even the so-called friends and even some of the dependent members of the family around us are supporting you, praising you, taking care of you, only because you have capacity to earn and providing them with the material things that they're interested in. Their love and praise are there as long as they can be showered with material things. Love and praise does give you, a human being, a sense of security and self-worth. But as soon as our body becomes old and infirm and we are unable to earn money, nobody seems to care for that very individual who had provided all the necessary things in their lives to the others. Unfortunately, even at home, no one seems to care to even speak to that particular person during the unproductive old age and has put some remote corner in the house. Most individuals are there to praise and be around only as long they're able to enjoy the bounty brought home through one's hard work. But later on, there's nobody there to ask about you or your welfare. Friends, the message is loud and clear. While we have the strength and energy, we must find the inner peace and permanent security in this human existence that is during our manushyatva. That can only come about through the intense desire of being liberated, mumukshvatva, only through the pursuit of the knowledge and guidance from the enlightened Guru regarding one's own true nature and realizing that our inner awareness is indeed immortal and naturally happy. Then only the true inner peace comes to us human beings. In that knowledge, the individual is well grounded, content, and very much at peace. He has no more desires. He is fully satisfied in the self. If you remember, the 55th verse says, Prajahati yada kaman. He has no more desires. Sarvan partha manogatan. Atmanye atmana tushtaha. Sita pradnyasya doshi. He is very much fully satisfied in the self. This master teacher of Advaita Vedanta, Shankaracharya, is reminding us not to waste this human birth without availing this rare opportunity to find the ever elusive permanent security and the true inner peace. Very painful title for the next one. The body is loved only as long as there is a life breath. Sanskrit verse goes like this. Yavat pavano nivasati dehe, tavat pruchati kushalam gehe. Gatavati varyo, gatavati vayo, deha paye, bharya bibhyati tasmin kaye. Bhaja Govindam, Bhaja Govindam. As long as dwells the breath of life in the body, so long they inquire about welfare at home. When the breath of life leaves and the body decays, even the wife is afraid of the very same body. Sanskrit word, yavat pavanaha dehe nivasati. As long as dwells the breath of life in the body, dehe nivasati. Tavat pruchati kushalam gehe. So long they inquire about your welfare at home. Gativati vayo deha paye. Once the breath of life leaves the body, bharya bibyati tasmin kahe. Even the wife is afraid of the same body. Shankaracharya is making a very morbid but very truthful statement in this verse. He said that during the wife lavishes her love and affection on her husband. Caressing and kissing all over his body, wife declares that her husband is her entire life. Nothing else exists, she states emphatically. However, when the husband breathes his last and body turns into a corpse, she is very much scared and afraid of the very same body. We as human beings tend to spend our entire life in sheer body worship, never prepare ourselves to achieve everlasting, genuine inner peace and tranquility by recognizing our true identity and living in that spirit throughout our human existence in this world. It's perfectly appropriate to be responsible trustee of our body by keeping it clean, well-dressed, well-nourished through proper diet, and physically and mentally healthy through exercise, rest, and recreation. But one must never forget that this body is merely an instrument offered to us only after going through multiple life cycles to reach the ultimate goal of liberation. The body must be used as a vehicle, like a boat, a car, or a plane, to go from point S to point M, from point samsara, S for samsara, and M to moksha. We advance from inorganic to organic, organic to mere life to lower level of consciousness, low level of consciousness of instinctive behavior in animals to human consciousness blessed with the capacity to making choices, free will, and acting or reacting based primarily upon cognitive analysis or viveka, right and wrong, moral and immoral, ethical, unethical, etc. We have to take proper steps to seek our true identity and then live in that knowledge to remaining mortal existence. And final verse for this morning, no one is attached to Parama Brahma. That basically summarizes this section for today. Balas tavat krida sakta, tarunas tavat taruni sakta, vruddhas tavat chinta sakta, parame brahmani kopina sakta, bhaja govindam, bhaja govindam. If you take the word balas tavat krida sakta, so long one is in the childhood, one is attached to play and games. It may be average games, insignificant game as we grow up, but we want to do nothing but play when we're little kids. Taruni tavas, taruni sakta. As long as we are youthful and young, one is attached to the youth of the opposite sex, young men running after young men, and vice versa. Vruddhas tavat chinta sakta. So long as the old age coming along, one is engrossed in anxiety. Somebody has to worry, right? Parame Brahmani kopina sakta. Unfortunately, no one is ever attached to Brahman, but his limitless supreme consciousness or true identity. Shankaracharya is expressing his frustrations here in this verse. That human beings seem to miss out on becoming spiritually enlightened despite this rare and precious opportunity of being born as a human being. Our mind seems to be distracted by different things at different stages in our lives. In our growth years, our childhood passes away in play and unproductive, often violent games. On video games, is even watching them are scary for me. Nothing else appears important in the childhood. thoughts of love and passion engage when you're youthful, and mind goes after men for women and women for the men. Once an individual gets old, like me, he's worried about everything: personal health, the fate of one's spouse and children, concern about the needed resources, which will be because you are not able to work and because of the weakened, infirm body. Unfortunately, at no stage does a man turn his mind to God, Parama Brahma, Govinda, moving through the success stages of life, remains engrossed in play, passion, and worries all through the stages of life. Something that we must remember and take proper steps to avoid. Sage Kathak in Kathopadishan reminds us of the same human frailties. He observes, created with sense organs which were turned outwards, and hence almost every human being tends to live feverishly active in sense indulgence only. Only a very few have a long-term perspective of life and withdraw themselves from the preoccupation of senses to seek the changeless, immutable Brahman or God. Message from Shankaracharya is loud and clear. Since the human being tends to waste his valuable time on earth, on transient things, momentary pleasures in life, we must change our course and make intense efforts to seek God. Not when we are old, when our body gets weak and mind seems to lose faculties of cognition memory. Since the human life is relatively short in the cosmic sense, we should turn our focus in our early life in the search of God. We must attach ourselves to that which is eternal and absolute bliss, detaching ourselves from the ever-changing realm of objects, which at best gives us some sensual pleasure, and that too for a limited period. One can understand if one has to struggle to obtain even the basic needs in one's life, one may not find even a free moment to think about the life of prayer. But when we arrive here in the United States, our fairly well-educated community should not have any such problem. Even then, we observe that very few individuals seem to spend time reflecting on their lives with discriminate inquiry or viveka, or as to what is real, what is unreal, what is transient, and what is permanent, what is important, which is not important in the long run. When reminded that those regular prayers are important by someone they respect, they always seem to find some excuses. In their mind, there always seems some justification that there are far more important things to do. Well, for me, every time I make a statement, it reminds me of a story. It goes to the story of sage Narada, a favorite person of mine, who considered himself to be the greatest devotee of Lord Narayana, Vishnu, expecting that God Vishnu would confirm his expectation, always saying Narada, oh, Narayana, Narayana. He asked that specific question, who is your most favorite devotee? Narayana, I don't need to tell you, he was able to judge right away as to what Narada was thinking, expecting to answer. He mentioned that the name of a poor farmer in a small village in Hemakuta. To make his point, he took Narada along in the disguise to Hemakuta. The farmer, in the evening as they arrived, welcomed these two travelers. Even though he was exhausted, offered them their meals. The children had already eaten their meals. Only food that was left in that house was the meal that was prepared for this farmer and his wife. He offered his meal to the visitors, and it looks as if the guests were not fully satisfied. His wife offered her meal as well, and they seemed to be satisfied. At night, the guests wanted to rest. The hut was very small, so he and his two children walked out of the hut and offered his small hut to these two travelers to sleep for night. They went outside to sleep. Then they travelers showed interest into what he did during the day. So the farmer took them along to the farm where he worked the whole day trying to go through his field with his bull and demonstrated to them how hard he had to work just to make the ends meet. In the evening, they all came back together. And as they walked on the banks of the farms, Narada asked him a question, how often do you pray? The farmer answered honestly. He said, you saw how hard I had to work the whole day. Honestly, I had only 3 times that I can do the prayers. When I head to the fields in the morning and going with my bull, I'm praying. When I come back in the evening, once again, alone with my bull, I get a chance to pray. And finally, end of the day, after finishing the meal and before retiring, I take a few moments to pray. I'm sorry, I don't have more time than that, but 3 times I do pray regularly. When the guests were leaving, this poor farmer made sure certain that the guests were offered a gift. So he offered a pitcher of mustard oil filled with to the top, very top as a gift to the 2 guests who had arrived. And Narada and Narayana left the hut. As soon as they walked out of the hut. Narayana said, no, Narada, do me a favor. Would you carry this oil on your head so that we don't spill anything till time we get to the main road? And then they had to walk through about a couple of miles on the banks of the fields. You know how it is. It's not easy to walk on that uneven area. They finally reached the main highway. And after they arrived after 1 hour or so, Narayana turned to Narada. I said, by the way, how often did you have a chance to pray me as you were going up to the highway? He said, Narada, you know what? You had told me to carry this part of my head carefully. I'm not supposed to drop a single drop of oil. You had instructed me. I was just concentrating on the part. I had no time to pray at all. I'm sorry. And Narayana turns to him and said, look, this farmer works hard, but still finds time 3 times a day to pray. And you did. And Narada understood exactly the correct reason why he was called the greatest devotee. Narada turned red in his face and his arrogance gradually disappeared. But again, this arrogance that comes around by some people who pray day in and day out and show off how much they pray, it is to be taken with how much amount of true devotion an individual has when he or she prays. And Sri Krishna, who was a keen observer of the human behavior also, was telling Arjuna, he said, Sahasreshu Manushyanam Sahasreshu Kaschit Yatati Siddhaye Chitam api Yatatam api Siddhanam Kaschin Ma Veti Tatvata. Out of thousands of men, one may strive for perfection, and among those who are attained it, only a very few individuals can understand me the truth. Similarly, he says that an average person or even respected person in the community seems to pursue the material objects and pleasures, does not seem to spend time to try and understand the real driving force behind the creation, who knows past, present, and future. Instead, they pray only to a specific deity to fulfill their material desires. Krishna expresses to Arjuna, I know all things that have gone before, that exist now, and that exist future, Arjuna, but no one at all knows me. Vedaham samatitani vartamani cha Arjuna bhavishyani cha bhutani mantu veda kaschana. He's reminding Arjuna and thereby each one of us that every one of us must find time to learn our true nature for a qualified, enlightened individual in this God-graced human life and reach the ultimate state of enlightenment and find everything everlasting happiness and contentment. So we don't have a moment to waste. Bhaja Govindam, Bhaja Govindam. I know it's a very powerful 5 verses we had a chance to review. It was important to reflect on it, think about it, and act on it. I'm going to stop at this stage and open up for comments and questions, and I'll go from there on.
Well, I have a fairly broad question. It's not tied to these specific verses so much, but it does appear in them. And my question is this. Shankara draws a very sharp distinction between human beings and other animals.
Mm-hmm.
Nowadays, we are aware that the distinction is not so sharp.
Mm-hmm.
First of all, we have evolution. And secondly, even with animals living today, so never mind what happened millions of years ago, we are increasingly appreciating that animals and birds can solve problems.
Mm-hmm.
They have feelings, they have societies, they show love and they show sorrow. So we do share quite a few qualities with them. And I wonder what bearing you think that would have had on Shankara's writings if he had had those things in mind.
I think it's a very good, solid question, important question, something for us to reflect upon. When we are talking about, we're recognizing now that the animals in many regions or several animals have certain qualities which are akin to our human behavior as well. We have to recognize and respect it. But what I would look at it, Shankara's comment, is those people who have capacity to differentiate between right and wrong, appropriate and inappropriate, important and not so important, that is the way that we need to follow. And not necessarily on those entities which the people or individuals or animals for that matter act on instincts alone. So I understand your question fully. And what I'm saying is that we make a distinction, animals who act on instincts and human beings are supposed to act rationally. That's a generalization. But you have to respect the animals, because as a matter of fact, if you find out in the hospitals as we deal, sometimes for the children that we take care of, the animals are the greatest friends. You see what I mean? For a patient with a cancer, painful thing that they're undergoing, they don't get any other comfort. Even the pain medication that we give does not give that much comfort. As a trained dog coming to that child going through suffering comes and sits with it, licks the baby's face or body, and makes the child comfortable. So, but again, the question is not animal or human being. Good question. Question is how much refinement the individual has. So in that spirit, I would look at Shankara's teaching in that spirit. But I'm glad you asked that question. Thank you. Before anybody asks the question, I want to make one more comment for you. Even though we are talking about not important being attracted to different sex, what I find personally from my experience is that Sri Krishna had explained very clearly the 2 lifestyles, one of sannyasi and one of samsari. Both the methods can take us to the ultimate goal without any question. Personally, I prefer being a samsari because I find a buddy system of great help. If I'm down, my wife picks me up and we both work around. If she is down, which rarely happens, I pick her up. The key is a buddy system of husband and wife is a very important thing, so that when we do the prayers, we always do the prayers together and we enjoy. So both methods are equally good, but it's been done within appropriate behavior, rational thinking, and moral attitude.
When you started on Bhagavad Gita and Bhaja Govindam, you mentioned that unless one integrates the spiritual teaching in one's life, it is useless. It's only knowledge, but not vijnana. So that got me started to thinking, what spiritual value would I integrate in my life? There are so many do's and don'ts. I always go back to Bhagavad Gita, and then I remembered you saying Bhagavad Gita is a summary of Tattvamasi. The first 6 chapters talk about Tvam, the next 6 chapters talk about Tat, and the last 6 chapters equates the two. Tat and Tvam are the same. And Mahavakya is also the Tattvamasi. So it seemed to me that I should integrate Tattvamasi into my life. And then I asked myself, how do I do that? Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, if you have any doubt, always look up to the wise people for advice. So I remembered all the wise people that I've been blessed to know and asked myself, what is it that characterizes them as wise? Number 1, they're respectful of everybody. They treat people with respect. And number 2, they're compassionate. Vidya Vinaya Sampanne, Brahmane Gavihasini, Shuni Shaiva Shvapakecha, Panditaha Samadarshinaha.
Exactly.
And then they are compassionate.
Mhm.
And because Advaishta Sarva Bhutanam, Maitraha Karuna Evasha.
Mhm.
So I should integrate the 2 qualities in my own life. Stop being judgmental and treat people with respect. And then I asked myself, is there anybody that I know who is disrespectful of everybody except himself? A person came to my mind. And
Mhm.
such a person is not wise. Adi Shankaracharya calls such a person a mudha. So do not follow
Exactly.
mudha, follow the wise person. So my take on Bhaja Govindam so far is that reorient my life to be respectful of others and to be compassionate. All the other things will follow. Once you're firmly rooted in those 2 principles, then everything else follows as a consequence. That's my take. And you talked about the Purushartha, Dharmartha, Kama, Moksha. You talked about Artha, you talked about Kama, you talked about Dharma, which is integrated into Artha and Kama throughout. And we see Moksha towards the end, when Adi Shankaracharya says, Soham, here I am.
Mhm.
Exactly the same thing as Tattvamasi. So your discussion so far has brought forth into me the full power of Tattvamasi. And I should not forget that. That's all I have to say.
Well, very nice of you.
Well
Good
said.
summary. I'm glad you did it. I think I mentioned briefly about value that we both of us enjoy being sansari, a buddy system supporting each other. We'll extend it further down the next session when we'll say value of being satsanga, where we'll be getting as a group discussion. We'll have that next time. Because every once in a while, we need that support system. We'll discuss that in greater time, greater details next time when we meet.
Okay.
Any other questions, comments?
Dr. Sane, this is Anandi.
Hi, Anandi.
Hi. See, I'm sorry, we have to go back to the second verse
Okay, that's fine.
that we did last time. I just have one question.
Sure.
That Muda Jahihi Danahama Drishna Guru Sadbuddhim Manasivi Drishna.
Mm-hmm.
That Sadbuddhi,
Mm-hmm.
what is that? That I think it refers to 10 characters, Sadbuddhim.
Mm-hmm.
Is that the right way of interpreting that?
Sat means basically correct way of thinking. That
Okay.
means intellect is used in an appropriate way called viveka, done with proper what is right, what is not right, what is important, what is not important, what is long-term, permanent, and what is temporary. By knowing that, that gives you a sat buddhi, and of course totally different than a person who's deluded, who has durbuddhi. Does that make it clear to you?
Yeah, here, like I say, I refer to that book from Shankaracharya, Kanjipur Mutt. They are, there is a reference here saying the Swayam Prakashar Vyagyana He says, Nitya Shuddha Buddha Mukta Satya Advidya Sushma Sanmatra Vibhuhu Ananda Sagara. These are the 10 characters of the Param Sat.
As a matter of fact, if you read Gita in different chapters, it gives you different facets of a person who is enlightened. As a matter of fact, I think Prasanna referred to Adveshta Sarva Bhutana. There are 20 characteristics of that devotee. And when I was younger, I used to think that devotee is dear to me. Bhakta Priya Sapriya. But really what Sri Krishna is describing in that 12th chapter is that these qualities are so powerful and important. He is no longer different than I am. So we'll be able to see the various positive qualities that will be described in Gita and many other important scriptures, which have to be imbibed, become inculcated in the human being, and expressed at different times, depending upon the situation. Sadbuddhi gives you a rational thinking. At different times, you have to be acting a different way. Not only one aspect, but using different virtues or qualities at different times, depending upon situations in life. That is Sadbuddhi. It's kind of difficult to describe one specific thing, but depending upon the circumstances, situation, how you use the intellect to analyze, make a decision, and execute. Okay?
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Namaste.
Dr. Sane, this is Anand.
Hey, Anand, good to see you.
Yeah, hi. I really like that story of the farmer that you told. And it brought up the question, what is the objective? We always say the objective is moksha or becoming jivan mukta in this life, etc., etc. And all the theory is based on achieving that objective. To me, it seems that the objective that is a hidden objective for us, which we never have state necessarily, is that we assume propagation of human life. That's a standard assumption. The entire work will come to an end if that assumption is wrong. So a grandfather plants a tree not for himself. He's not going to live that long to see the fruits of it, but for his grandson. People do research on cancer. It may take 100 years to get there. But they continue because they think it will be of use to somebody, right? So the presumption, the goal in life is, in a sense, unstated goal is propagation of life, right? And you could start from that and look at Bhaja Govindam and say, if that is the goal, then what will be the role of sex in life, right? What will be the role, how should we behave with an atiti? The various stanzas kind of, but looked at it from a slightly different perspective. I might want to do that. I don't have all the knowledge here in front of me, but just changing that goal. And I wonder whether that's what the farmer was doing. He was, helping his family. Perhaps he had children. Yeah, he did have children. So, those kinds of things. And God essentially said that was the important thing in life. Prayers are not necessarily important. And that is what I think has been said earlier when Vivekananda, for example, says that every person is divine and the objective in life is to express that divinity, right? Through work. I mean, that famous paragraph could be reinterpreted so many different ways. So I like that farmer's idea.
I think I'm glad you like that story, but the important, I can stress one more time, is looking at his life, he was working hard, fulfilling his duties to take care of his family, at the same time recognizing that all the things that has been bestowed upon him were bestowed by the divine grace. So he was also not forgetting that everything that is happening to him was only his making. He was trying his best to make certain that he's fulfilling his duties for his stage in life, and not forgetting that grace of God is very important, because he could lose his health, he could lose his family members. So he was doing it at the same time, was not forgetting where the blessings were coming. So that's what we need to do as human beings.
Right.
Continue your duties depending on the phase of your life, but never ever forget that grace of God is important and blessing us. And even when you understand your true nature or your awareness, and you're fully satisfied with yourself, Atmanya Atma, your life work is not over. You have to continue helping other people to the best of your capacity. Because even when Ramakrishna Paramahamsa, enlightened he did not accept the premises that he should save himself from cancer of the throat, the larynx. He said, no, let me suffer through my prarabdha. At the same time, I'll continue to teach the people, help the people around till the time I die. So we have to continue our job, knowing fully that it's come directly from the God's blessing. And
right.
That's the way I look at it.
I mean, there is no question that one has to have humility.
Oh, absolutely.
Right. That's right. And if I could go back to Johnny's question earlier about the animals and the like,
sure.
Then I think once one understands that, and that aspect of it may not have been understood 5,000 years ago, may or may not, I don't know. But once one understands that, then this idea that it is just the perpetuation of human species, that objective will have to be broadened.
Sure.
And some restrictions placed on how you go about doing that, right? So that brings in this idea of taking care of the earth.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, Prasanna alluded to that comment too. Even though it may not have been known exactly the details of the capacity of various animals, when we listen to that 414 verse, Vidya Vinaya Sampanne, Brahmane Gavi Hastini, Shunichaiva Shvapakeja. That means in the mind of an enlightened individual, all entities are equal. That means where Shuni is dark, Hastini, that means the elephant, Shvapaka is basically untouchable, that means this outcast. All of them are equal according to that wise, enlightened person, because he is able to see, or she is able to see, the real goodness that makes that individual unique as it is. If his actions are inappropriate, it's not because he's bad, but because he has not fulfilled his entire potential. So for him, he's never arrogant or disrespectful. He respects everyone. As a matter of fact, these enlightened people go out of the way to be extra kind to the people who need the help. As a matter of fact, you should just come to the hospital many times when we see the patients. Patients who are sick, of course, we treat them, but who are handicapped. That's the reason we had the privilege to work not only at Children's in Minneapolis and St. Paul, but also at Gillette Children's and Shriners Hospital. These are handicapped people that you go extra mile to make certain that they're kept comfortable. So you have to treat every human being with the same dignity that you deserve for yourself.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, we can hear you. Can't see you.
All right. No, I really enjoyed this discussion, Dr. Sane. Thank you. I have heard many times these, I mean, it's just a short piece, right? Bhaja Govindam, but it is full of meaning, and I really appreciate it. And I listen to it without really understanding it many times. I have a tape or CD and I listen to it. But one of the comments I had today is, and you highlighted this, that as a child, we have to be playful. We have time to do that. In fact, children who are not playful and have had psychological trauma in their childhood, it impacts them through many phases of their life. Mm-hmm. Then the second step, then you're attached to a loved one, a sweetheart, your wife, a little excessively perhaps in the beginning, and then it should then evolve into a more spiritual contact between your spouse, etc. So on the whole, you're evolving through life, and not with the goal of being a sannyasi, but of course goal of enlightenment, which you may or may not reach in that lifetime of yours, but it has to be a continuous path. And perhaps, as you said, many times when you give the Bhagavad Gita as a gift, the college students will, do their texts and all of that, but leave the Bhagavad Gita for later in their life.
Yeah.
Well, then there's an acceleration process. I mean, I plead guilty of doing the same thing, but for the last many years, I understand that time is running short. So I have to get going and learning a little bit faster than I have been taking it easy and whatnot. So this reminds us that we are truly not immortal, and we really need to define all of this for ourselves, and etc. So can you make a comment? I mean,
no, I think glad finally today's Sundays. I take confessions any day, but Sundays especially. So that's perfectly fine. Only thing I could say that this is the common reaction, which is normal. That doesn't mean that we could not change our behavior. And one thing which I always because Sri Krishna was never a individual who put you down, where depressed you. He says that even if you don't succeed, you can start from the point where you left. He said, 44th verse of the, I think, 6th chapter, he said, Purvabhyasena teneva riyate yavashopya. So basically, wherever you left the education, refinement in your previous life, don't worry about it. You can start exactly from that point onwards in the next life. So it does not say you waste it. You're preparing. You didn't finish the homework last time or last life. You can start exactly from same point next life. So that is the way he encourages it. I mean, I find him the most exciting teacher of our times, that he described this story, and literally a beautiful distilling of all the Upanishads. So that's the most favorite book of mine, Bhagavad Gita. So
yeah, no, it's a comforting thought.